your fourth point is about sense of urgency. And
Yeah.
the way I want to spin this question for you is all the entrepreneurs and small business owners I see, feel like everything is urgent, right? So,
Yeah.
I mean, there's a sense of urgency, but it could be negative in a sense because everything is urgent. So talk a little bit about
Yeah.
your points around sense of urgency.
Well, you've hit on two key things. Um, One of them is I learned a long time ago when I was preparing to do a speech on strategic thinking and strategy. I had an epiphany, and I was going to teach at Cornell. And the epiphany was this: that one of the strongest skills of a great strategic thinker is figuring out what to say no to,
Mm-hmm.
what we won't do, markets we won't move into, customers we won't serve, products we aren't going to invest in. I see a lot of entrepreneurs trying to be all things to all people, which means they end up being nothing to anybody and going bankrupt. So a big skill and around this sense of urgency is figuring out what your real priorities are and then having the courage to say no to anything that is not on that priority list. And that takes a tremendous amount of discipline and courage. Number two is urgency is not about speed. Urgency is about speed plus results. I work in a lot of organizations where everybody's running around at a million miles an hour. They're going fast. Lots of stuff's happening, but actually nothing is getting moving forward. When I talk about sense of urgency, yes, it's go to meeting, but in every one of those meetings, you make a decision, you move forward on a project, you assign something, you delegate it, you hold people accountable. It isn't the speed that matters, it's speed plus results. And that's John Cotter just wrote a great new book called Sense of Urgency. And that's the whole thing he talks about. It's speed, but speed that makes things happen. And to me, it's speed that makes the most important things happen right now. And that brings together that learning to say no, understanding your priorities, and then moving on your priorities with a sense of urgency.
And you talk a little bit about the different levels of decision making. And I want to ask you to expand on that a little bit. And what I'm really trying to get to is how do we make this tactical for the person who's watching? What are the one or two things they can do right now to make sure that when they instill that sense of urgency, that it's happening in the right way? What are the tactical things they can do?
Cool. And great question. And these are things I learned in the trenches running companies. The first thing is I was a fanatic for making sure that once we set the priorities, we created a plan, we had our goals, that we put it in a small, easy to read book. In our company, we always called it the Red Book, and you carried that to every meeting. So, we knew that we had 3 or 4 strategic objectives, a couple of key projects, and a couple of milestones that had to be met. And we never went to a single meeting where that book wasn't open. And when we discussed something, we said, does it match what we've got in the book? If it doesn't, then it's off the table. We shouldn't do it. And the only way that we will change the book is if we feel that the marketplace has changed so much that it necessitates that the strategic plan be changed. And, I had a couple of billionaires on my board of directors, and that would have meant I had to call them up and ask them to send the book back to me so I could tear a page out and put a new one in. And that was a big hurdle for my staff. I said, do you really want to call Mr. Rockefeller and ask him for his book back?
Right.
And, they go, no. I go, okay, if you're not willing to do that, then we don't change your strategy. So tactical step number 1 is create a document, a book, a handbook, a couple of pages, one page that outlines key priorities, key objectives, key strategies, and every single meeting you take that, and that becomes a foundation for all discussions, checking back and forth, does it match with what we said we'd do?
Right.
And then you mentioned I've got a 4-level decision-making process I use because and this is a problem a lot of entrepreneurs have. When I first took over at Rockefeller, I thought, man, it's so cool. Everybody comes to me to make the decisions. I run the whole place. Everything. I have my finger on the pulse until I realized I was holding the whole place back because nothing happened if I wasn't the one that said yes or no. And I realized that even though it made me feel special and important that there was a line of people at my door asking for decisions, that actually I was hurting the organization. So I developed this, 4 levels of decision making. Level 1, you own the decision as the employee. Don't even talk to me about it. This is what I hired you for. This is where your skill set is. No discussion. Don't talk to anybody else. Just make this decision and you own it. Decision level number 2 was you own this decision, but you probably ought to get some feedback from someone in the company. Might not be me as CEO, might be the CFO, might be the head of marketing, might be the head of sales, but go ask for some feedback. But at the end of the day, sit down at the desk. You make this decision on your own. You own it with feedback from the appropriate people. Level 3 is this will be a team decision. We're going to get everybody in the organization together, whether it's 3 of us or 30 or 300, and say, this is critical, and I want everybody's feedback. And me as the leader, I'm going to go along with whatever all you all say. Even if it's against what I say, if the entire team believes we should go in this direction, and I think we should go in that direction, I'm going to back up and go, I trust the team on this one. And then level 4 is, I make this decision as the leader. I'm going to get your feedback and your input, but at the end of the day, I own this, I'll make the decision. And all of you have to trust that I'm making a decision that's in the best interest of all of us. Maybe I have some information you don't have, or I know something you don't. Here's what happened is people would walk in my office, they go, hey, John, and I go, no, level 1. And they go, okay, back to their office. They'd stick their head, John, I need some help. And I go, no, level 2, and I'm not the right guy. Go talk to somebody else. Eventually, it got to the point where 50% of the decisions were being made correctly and effectively without me being involved at all. Rarely did we have a level 3 decision where the entire team had to get together, and even rarer was it that there was a level 4 decision. So pretty soon there was no one, and I'll tell you, as an entrepreneur and as a business owner, it's a little scary when no one comes to ask you for help. When there isn't a line at your door, you feel like maybe you're not as important, but then you realize, no, the business is moving ahead really, really fast at a great pace because I have incredibly talented people making good decisions based on our key priorities and our objectives, and they don't need me to tell them what to do.
That's excellent. What a great tactic. And then, and I'm sure you got to feel it around a little bit, and the whole concept of having a great plan. That one, the Red Book, as you mentioned it, helps a lot. I mean, it helps put the framework in place. So great stuff. And also core values. Is that other wall that you need to really help people feel comfortable making decisions, right? In that tree.
Well, yeah, I think what you do is the core values, the culture, the vision are like sort of rails on either side of the track.
Right.
And, it sort of keeps people in the right bounds. And what I've always said, as long as it's prudent, ethical, and the legal, and in the best interest of our customers, and it's within those boundaries, you do anything you want to do. Come in when you want to come in, leave when you want to leave, do what you need to do, make the decisions. I trust you. I hired you because I trust you. Yep. As long as you stay in these boundaries of vision, values, ethics, you have a free rein to make the decisions you need to make. And when you get good people, they really flourish in that kind of an environment.
Well, that leads to the next point in your book. I think the whole concept of disciplined execution. The SOPs, the model, that's another rail, right? I mean, if you will, this is how we're going to go execute. Talk a little bit about that point.
Well, this was one of the most difficult chapters for me to write because I am not a process guy. I don't like, methodical checklists and make sure everything's right. I'm a big picture guy. I prefer to see the vision of the company and let's run, Well, to run, you got to tie your shoes, put on your socks, So it was hard, but I also understood that if you want to have any level of repeatable success, that you have to put processes and systems and procedures in place to allow you to make sure that when you have a great idea, it's actually effectively executed and delivered on time. And to write, you'll get a kick out of this, Robert, to write this chapter, I felt like I had a pretty good handle on execution, but I went and I bought every single book that I could possibly buy that had execution in the title, 21 of them, read them cover to cover, and about 3/4 of the way through, my wife looked at me and said, "So, freak, what are you learning?" I said, "Well, I've read about 8,000 pages here, and here's what I've learned. 2 things. One is I don't really like consultants, even though I am one, because all they do is take other people's ideas, change them around, put new names on them, and charge more money for it, which is partially true. And number 2 is I've just read 8,000 pages from 15 different authors, and they all say the exact same thing. But that's good because that meant I discovered the pattern. And once I studied it closely enough, the pattern of effective execution became extremely clear. I mean, it was right there in front of my face, and what I've done in that chapter is there's 9 steps. And it's my assertion, if you follow the 9 steps with discipline, you will go from 10 to 15% effective execution up to the 75-85% effective execution. When I put that list up in front of most companies and say, think of a major project that's stalled right now, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well are you doing each of these steps? They get to about number 3 and quit. And they go, we understand now why things are not being followed through on.
Right.
I see you smiling because you've been through a bunch of this.
Well, yeah, sure. I mean, I think the biggest thing is going back to the earlier point where you talk about learning how to say no. Creating that vivid vision so that you know exactly what to say no to is probably the first step in effective execution, getting everybody on the same page. So, yeah, that's the biggest problem I see is just people are spread way too thin.
Oh, wow.